All right, I'm recording now. I will get started with just the couple things that I wanted to go through on the blood vessels and circulation outline. And then, like I said, whatever you guys have questions about, or if there's anything you want me to go through specifically, I'm happy to do that. And then we can talk about the test for a little bit. So I do want to do like that, basically that first page of the blood vessels outline, just to go through the basic structure of a blood vessel and the three layers that are called tunics that surround, that form the walls of a blood vessel. We'll go through that, and then just a couple other things related to blood vessels and circulation. So there are 5 main types of blood vessels. There's arteries, and then smaller arteries that are called arterioles. There are capillaries, which are the smallest blood vessels. Then there's veins and venules, which are small veins. And most blood vessels, there is one exception, but most blood vessels have 3 tunics that surround them. These are basically 3 layers of tissue, and they surround the lumen, which is the hollow center of the blood vessel. So the first one listed is called the tunica externa, and the tunica externa is the outer layer. And it's the strongest layer. So it provides a lot of support for the blood vessel. So it's strong supporting layer. And as far as composition goes, this is just like what it's made out of, what type of tissue, what type of fibers. So for the composition, it's composed mostly of collagen and elastic fibers. And if you can think back to A&P1, when you learned about the different tissue types and the different types of fibers that form connective tissues, you would have learned about collagen fibers, elastic fibers, and reticular fibers. So just as a quick refresher, collagen fibers are the strongest type of fiber. So collagen, whenever you have a lot of collagen fibers in a tissue, it makes that tissue really strong. And then elastic fibers are, just like the name indicates, they're like elastic. They are stretchy, like a rubber band. So when you have elastic fibers in a tissue, it makes it it makes it like flexible, capable of kind of stretching and then going back to the original size and shape. So that's the tunica externa. It's the external layer, the outer layer. Then is the tunica media. That's the middle, thickest layer. And for the composition of this one, it's made of smooth muscle and elastic fibers. And because this layer consists of muscle, a layer of muscle tissue, it can actually contract and relax, just like all muscle tissue can. And by doing that, by contracting or relaxing, it can change the diameter of the lumen. Remember, the lumen is the space that runs through the middle of the blood vessel. So if it contracts, it can make the space smaller. And if it relaxes, it can make the space bigger. So by doing that, it can regulate the diameter of the lumen. All right, and then the last layer is called the tunica interna, also known as the tunica intima. And this is the inner lining of a blood vessel. It's the innermost layer. And you actually have written in your outline already that this is actually made of 2 layers, but both layers are very, very thin. So overall, the tunica intima is very thin. The innermost layer is, and this is the main part of it. This is the main part of the tunica intima. It's made of endothelium, which is just a single layer of simple squamous epithelial tissue. It's the thinnest tissue that you can have, really. And then there's just a basement membrane underneath of it for support. So that is a super thin layer. Okay. So there is information already in the web page that I created for this part of Unit 1, the blood vessels section, where I do provide some information about arteries and the different types of arteries. There's elastic arteries, which are the ones that are closest to the heart, that are very elastic. They're very flexible and stretchy. And then they lead into muscular arteries, which then branch into arterioles, which is the third type of artery. So there's like a description for each of those in that web page. And then you have more information that's already filled out in the outline. Then there are the capillaries, which are the smallest blood vessels. And these are the ones that only consist of a tunica intima. So they only have that innermost layer. They don't have a tunica media or a tunica externa. So these have very thin walls. And capillaries connect arterioles, which are the smallest arteries, to venules, which are the smallest veins. And I will tell you their function, the function of capillaries, which is really important. They allow for the exchange of gases and nutrients. Between blood and surrounding tissues. Okay, so they allow for the exchange of gases and nutrients between the blood, which the blood is within the capillaries. It's flowing through the lumen of the capillaries, and the tissues that are outside of the capillaries. So it's really important to know that it's at this level. Like, it doesn't happen in the arteries, it doesn't happen in the veins. It's only once blood reaches the capillaries that you have this exchange of gases and nutrients. So the main gases we're talking about are oxygen and carbon dioxide. Oxygen is being delivered from the blood to all of your tissues. And at the same time, carbon dioxide is moving from your tissues into the blood, because that's a gas that you want to get rid of. Tissues are producing that as a waste product. So it's going to move from tissues into the blood, and then the blood can carry it away. Also, it's at this time where nutrients are going to move from the blood into the surrounding tissues that are around these capillaries. So capillary beds have a really important function, and that is to provide these important things that are needed for a tissue to remain alive. So they're giving oxygen and nutrients to tissues. And there's a couple different types of capillaries. The most common type are the continuous capillaries, but there's also fenestrated and sinusoids or sinusoidal capillaries. The main difference is just the size of the like spaces in the walls of the capillaries. Continuous capillaries really don't have gaps in their walls. There's like no spaces, but fenestrated capillaries have fenestrations, which are small holes. And sinusoidal capillaries have larger holes in them. So stuff can easily just move in and out of the capillary through these large holes. And then finally, veins. So these are, they're similar to arteries. They have all three tunics. They have all three layers forming their wall. But the tunics tend to be thinner, like arteries tend to have thicker walls and veins have thinner walls. But a lot of times veins do have a larger lumen, like the space through the middle of the vein is bigger than in arteries. One more thing that's unique about veins that you don't see in the other two types of blood vessels, you don't have in arteries and you don't have in capillaries, are valves. Veins have valves in them. They look kind of like the cuspid valves in the heart. So veins contain valves. And the reason for that is because these valves help prevent the backflow of blood as it's returning to the heart. So veins are always carrying blood toward the heart. Arteries are the opposite. Arteries always carry blood away from the heart. But veins are always carrying blood back toward the heart. And if you think about the location of the heart in the body, the heart is all the way up towards the top of the body. It's up in your thoracic cavity, like right up here. And then you have your whole torso and your legs and your feet that are below the heart. So the blood that is returning to the heart from all of those areas below, the majority of your torso, your legs and your feet, that blood is moving against gravity. It's going up this direction and gravity is pulling it back down. So, and there's not a whole lot of blood pressure. Like blood pressure is pretty low in veins. And blood pressure is basically like the force that's forcing blood through blood vessels. So if blood pressure is low, you don't have a whole lot of force that's pushing blood through. So as a result, the blood in veins has a tendency to like flow backward because of the pull of gravity. It could just sink right back down. But fortunately, you do have valves every so often in your veins, and those valves are going to close and prevent blood from sinking all the way back down. Because if you think about it, like without these valves, blood would just sink all the way back down into your feet and your feet would just swell up with blood. So it's important that the valves prevent blood from flowing all the way back down. But also there's a couple other things that help to keep blood flowing through the veins. One of those things is just muscle movements, like even just being active, moving around, walking around, moving your legs. When that happens, your muscles contract and they squeeze up against your veins. They like squeeze your blood vessels, and that movement helps to push blood up in the right direction and get it back to the heart. So that helps too. So that was like one kind of major area that I wanted to go through on that blood vessel outline. I do remember, I don't know if you've watched it yet, but I do have the recorded lecture of me going through the whole blood pressure and regulation of blood pressure section. So I'm not really going to focus on that too much. The other thing that we could look at, if you guys want to, is skipping over that blood pressure section, because you already, like I said, you already have that recorded lecture for that part. But then going down, hold on, I'm scrolling through your outline right now. Going down to like circulation and the circulatory pathways, which look like they're on page 8. I can do like a quick overview of just circulation and where arteries and veins are located in the body. if that would be helpful. I can do that in a couple minutes. You guys see where I am? If you have the outline in front of you, it looks like it's page 8 on the outline. At least it is on the one I have pulled up. So it's circulatory pathways. And there's really two circulatory pathways in the body. There's pulmonary circulation, which is a very short loop that just goes from the heart to the lungs and then back to the heart. And then there's systemic circulation, which is a very big loop that goes from the heart to all parts of the body, all your tissues, all your organs, and then back to the heart. So pulmonary circulation, we can go through really quickly because it is a very short loop and it doesn't involve many blood vessels at all. The function of this circulatory route is to bring blood to the lungs so that it can make contact with the air that's in the lungs and so that it can pick up oxygen. And eventually you're going to bring that oxygen to all of your tissues and organs. So this is sending deoxygenated blood to the lungs so it can get oxygenated and then bringing it back to the heart. So it starts in the right ventricle because remember, it's the right side of the heart that handles deoxygenated blood. So then deoxygenated blood gets pumped out of the right ventricle. It goes through the pulmonary semilunar valve, which is at the entrance to the pulmonary trunk. So it goes through the pulmonary trunk. And then remember, pulmonary trunk splits into 2 pulmonary arteries. One goes to the left lung, the other one goes to the right lung. And then within the lungs, those arteries split into pulmonary capillaries. And remember, we just talked about capillaries, how it's at the capillary level that you have gas exchange. So once blood reaches the pulmonary capillaries, it's here that oxygen can move from the lungs into the blood. So now oxygen is picked up and blood leaves the lungs through pulmonary veins, which carry, now it's oxygenated blood into the left atrium. So that's it. That's the pulmonary route. It's just going from the right side of the heart to the lungs, picking up oxygen, and then that oxygenated blood ends up back on the left side of the heart in the left atrium. Systemic circulation is much bigger because this spans like the entire body. It's a big loop that goes all the way through the body. And we can fill in the function for systemic circulation. This is a long loop or a large loop that delivers oxygen and nutrients, to all body tissues while removing carbon dioxide and other wastes. Okay. All right, so you're basically bringing oxygenated blood to all of your organs and tissues, and then oxygen as well as nutrients are moving out of the blood and into the tissue because those things are needed for the tissue to stay alive. But then at the same time, there is an exchange because then the blood is going to pick up waste products coming from the tissue, which include things like carbon dioxide, urea, different like acids, are produced as waste products, so they get picked up by the blood. Okay, one thing I mentioned in the lab group today is that oxygen-rich blood, oxygenated blood, is shown in red on models and in diagrams and pictures, and oxygen-poor blood, which we call deoxygenated blood, is shown in blue. So let me do the next little section here that's not filled in. And then I'll probably stop there and just like what I wanted to go through and see if there's anything else you guys want me to go through. And then we can talk about the test specifically. So right underneath of here, right underneath of that part, still within systemic circulation is a description of just what's included. So systemic circulation includes all arteries and arterioles that branch off of the aorta. So it's all of the arteries and arterioles that branch off of the aorta. So they are delivering oxygenated blood to tissues. It also includes all of the venules and veins that are returning deoxygenated blood to the heart.
I'm sorry, repeat that a little bit for the last one. It's return the DOB.
Yeah, so it's all the veins and venules that are returning DOB, deoxygenated blood, to the heart. So for these arteries and veins that are part of systemic circulation, that are basically throughout your body, in your head, your neck, your arms, your legs, your torso, there are a couple differences between the location and just the structure of the arteries and the veins. So that's it. That's that next little thing. And it's written here already, but I just wanted to talk about it because I know that there was a test question asking about that specifically, just like the differences between arteries and veins throughout the body. So one thing is that arteries are always located deep. Like they're not close to the body's surface. They are deep inside the body, whereas veins are located in deep and superficial areas. Superficial means that they are close to the surface. So you know, like if you look at your wrist, like you can see some veins. You can see veins that look bluish, purplish maybe, and you can see them because they are close to the surface. You can't see arteries like that. They are always deeper inside the body. Another thing is that veins are more interconnected. So there's just more like connections between veins, not really with arteries. So veins are more connected to each other. And then one other thing, the brain and also the digestive system both have special, a special like group of veins that drain blood out of those areas. So again, that information is already written in your outline, but I just wanted to discuss it because I do know that there is a test question on that part. All right, so the next thing is really just like identifying those blood vessels and just knowing where they're located. So like coronary arteries are bringing blood to the heart. The term coronary always refers to the heart. So you have like a right one and a left one. They're both carrying blood into the heart itself. Another example, so like the common carotid artery. There's a right common carotid, there's a left common carotid. Both of these travel up the neck. They're carrying blood up the neck. And ultimately that blood is going to get to the head, to the brain. Subclavian arteries. The name kind of tells you where it goes. Sub means under, and clavian refers to the clavicle. So these go under the clavicle and out toward the arm. So these are carrying blood toward the arms. And in a lot of cases, like as you just go through and you can look at the names of these arteries, I mean, pretty much you can probably figure out where they're carrying blood to just by looking at the name of the artery. So I don't know, for example, like if you go on to the next page, you can see the gastric artery, left gastric artery. Do you guys have a guess where that might be going, where it brings blood to?
The stomach?
Yeah. Yep. Gastric refers to the stomach. So yeah, that's bringing blood to the stomach. Splenic artery, still thinking about within that area, within the abdominal cavity. Splenic refers to the spleen. Hepatic, do you guys know what organ hepatic refers to? It's okay. Hepatic is liver, so that's carrying blood to the liver. Other one, I mean, I'm sure you can figure out. So gonadal arteries are for the gonads. It's different based on whether you're female or male. Female have ovarian arteries, so that's pretty obvious. Ovarian arteries go to the ovaries. Testicular arteries go to the testes. So if you know, especially if you've taken like medical terminology before, you'll know a lot of these names for regions of the body, and the name like pretty much tells you where, what area or what organ these arteries are carrying blood to. Another one, just going back up, so the thoracic aorta splits into, there's several arteries that come off of the thoracic aorta, like in the chest. Intercostal arteries go to the intercostal muscles. Those are just like there are small muscles that are like in between your ribs, kind of. So intercostal arteries supply the intercostal muscles. Bronchial arteries, they supply the lungs. And this name you might not know, phrenic. The term phrenic refers to the diaphragm. The diaphragm is that muscle that's underneath the lungs. And we haven't done respiratory system yet, but the diaphragm is the muscle that helps with breathing. Like when it moves, it causes inhalation and exhalation. So the diaphragm is right under the lungs. I mean, I'm almost done. So let me go. I'll just go through the rest of these real quick, tell you where they're carrying blood to. We did all the arteries that branch off of the celiac trunk. This is now, we're just going down. So now we're in the abdominal aorta, all the arteries that branch off of the abdominal aorta and the abdominal cavity. Superior mesenteric artery, that carries blood to the small intestine. Do you guys know what renal refers to? What organ renal refers to? It's the kidneys. So that's where renal arteries go. We did the gonadal arteries, talked about the two types of those. Inferior mesenteric artery supplies the large intestine. Remember, superior mesenteric was for small intestine. Inferior mesenteric supplies the large intestine with blood. And then finally, common iliac arteries they kind of go down into they start in the pelvic area and they then split the common iliac arteries, each one, you have one on each side, right and left sides. Each one splits into an internal iliac artery, which goes toward it's in the pelvic cavity, and it supplies the pelvic organs with blood. Pelvic organs would be things like the bladder. Also, the rectum is right there. So that's the one branch. The internal iliac artery goes toward the middle of the body into the pelvic cavity. The external iliac artery goes towards the outside and it enters the thigh. So the external iliac artery goes into the legs, actually. Okay. So that takes care of a lot of the blood vessels outline, because you have the little lecture that I've recorded on blood pressure and regulation of blood pressure. So you have all of that. So that combined with the information that's on the webpage should definitely help you fill out the rest of that outline if you haven't done it yet. I mean, I can give you a quick overview for the test. I do want to make one update because I removed a question from the test, but there is a review sheet posted for you. I'll just share my screen so you can see the your D2L course. And if you go to here, the second part of Unit 1, you'll see a test review document right here. So open that up and you'll have a basic overview of the test. So number of questions. But like I said, don't give me, as soon as we get off of the Zoom, I want to update this because I was just going through the test and I did remove, I'm gonna have to recount, but I removed, I think, one question. So it's gonna be now, I believe, 70 questions and 104 points. So I am about to update this, but not a lot has changed. So it tells you like the format of the questions. Most of them are multiple choice. There is going to be a diagram of an EKG. Remember, we talked about like the P wave, the QRS complex, and the T wave, and maybe just identifying like which one is the P wave, QRS complex, and T wave, and maybe also, actually definitely also knowing what they represent, which is, we said that in the lecture outline, the study outline from the lecture that we had on Thursday. So P wave represents atrial depolarization, QRS complex represents ventricular depolarization, T wave represents ventricular repolarization. So that's it. You'll have it just in a picture of an EKG and maybe answering a couple questions about that. There's 3 matching sections related to blood vessels. So it could just be knowing about the blood vessel structure and like the 3 tunics, definitely knowing tunica externa, media, and intima or interna, and just the characteristics of those. Also knowing the characteristics of the blood vessels, arteries, capillaries, and veins. And knowing a little bit about the specific names of blood vessels. So like left gastric artery, that supplies the stomach. Splenic artery supplies the spleen, you know, that what we just went through. And then you will have 2 diagrams where you identify which blood vessels are which on the diagram. Like you're identifying the names of blood vessels that are pointed out on a diagram. So it's going to be, and I can pull up the webpage, but it's going to be the exact diagrams that are posted in this unit. I'll go show you in a sec. So from the textbook, I mean, I'm referring you for these figures. One of them is the EKG picture. So you will have exactly that same EKG picture on the test. The other things, you won't necessarily have these pictures on the test, but I just felt like knowing them would be helpful, like studying those particular things would be helpful for, you know, studying for the test overall. And then you will have a couple of questions that are directly from the 2 homeworks that will be on the test. Let me go back here and just show you the blood vessel diagrams that I'm referring to. So here's the web page on blood vessels and circulation. It's all the way at the bottom. So let me scroll down. Here's a lot of the information about the specific blood vessels. We went through a lot of it, but there's some more that you could use this info to fill out the rest of your outline. Info about blood pressure. Here's my recorded lecture on blood pressure. So definitely that's going to help. Please listen to that and use that to fill out that section of the outline. And then here's info about circulation. So it's these pictures here, and here that will be on the test. And you'll just need to know the ones that are listed, the vessels that are listed. So these are arteries. And this is the whole list, but these are the arteries that are on here. And then this is the list of veins that will be on here. If you guys need to double check with me on anything, I'm happy to do that. So I think, let me just check, but those 2 blood vessel labeling sections are just letting you know how many you'll have to identify. So there's 5. Oh no, sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 8 arteries. So going back, back here. There will be 8 arteries, and actually it's going to be from the top half of this picture. I don't have the bottom half on there. It's cut off right here. So there will be 8 arteries that you'll identify on this half of the diagram. And then for the veins, there will also be 8. And again, it is cut off here. So it's going to be the top half of the body. So that eliminates some for you already, and the ones that are on the bottom half, which would be like the femoral, great saphenous. Those won't be on there because I have the picture cut off like right here below the torso. So 8 arteries, 8 veins. And then in addition to that, there's a matching section about the arteries and another matching section about the veins. For like the arteries, it just describes like where they, and for the veins, just describes like where they are, what areas they are bringing blood to. For the veins, it would just be like the areas that they're bringing blood from. And the veins, for the most part, have the same name as the arteries in a lot of cases. Like you have a femoral artery and you have a femoral vein. They're right next to each other. Both of them are in the thigh, right by the femur. So we've got those 2 matching sections. You have a matching section about the blood vessel tunics that we talked about, the 3 layers of tissue that form the wall of the blood vessel. But other than that, other than those labeling and matching questions, everything else is multiple choice. And I told you this, I think in the Zoom on Thursday, but the best thing to do is use everything I've given you to fill in what you don't have filled in already in your study outlines, the 2 study outlines. You probably should have the first one pretty well filled out because we did a lot of that from the lecture, the Zoom lecture last week. And then we did some for the second one just now. And then after you listen to the recorded lectures, if you haven't done that yet, that's going to fill in the gaps for both of them pretty much. And then those are really like your study guides for the test. You can review your chapter homeworks again, that might help. And then just study those lecture outlines, those study outlines. And that's what pretty much the questions are derived from. So I do have 15 more minutes. I have another meeting at 2, but I have 15 more minutes if there's any questions you guys have or anything specific that you want to talk about.
How long do we have to take the test?
You have the same amount of time that you would get in the normal class. So it is 1 hour and 50 minutes. I think pretty much for all the classes that you guys are taking right now, like online or web conferencing, we like our rule as a department is to give you always just the same amount of time you would have had if it was an in-person class. Okay. Any other questions that you can think of? All right, well, I am gonna update the review sheet really quickly right now as soon as we get off. So you can check that in like 10 or 15 minutes, it'll be updated. And it's really just one little like small change.